Garvey cited his popularity amongst his aristocratic lady fellow travelers and playfully speculated that he might one day return to Jamaica with a white heiress on his arm. 2 months later, it was apparent that it wasn't just Europe's great architectural sites that caught the young man's attention. On March 2nd, 1914, Marcus Garvey confided bashfully to Alfred Cap Burrows, "I am engaged to a Spanish-Irish heiress whom I had the pleasure of meeting on the continent." Providence had waved her magical hand and an heiress had materialized. He had mused on the fantasy of a union with such a creature. Remarkably, it now seemed a distinct possibility. It was a spectacular volte-face. Love had triumphed over his often stated and violently held belief that any union between blacks and whites was repugnant. "It is somewhat destructive of my principle," he conceded. "Yet I hardly think I can change my mind marrying her." End quote. Marcus had to work to pay his 3-week return voyage to Jamaica aboard the SS Trent. While on his passage across the Atlantic, Marcus meets a South African missionary who tells him of the horrors of black mistreatment in Basuto land. It was at this point, or so it is attested, that the young Marcus Garvey came to the vision of an African home state for the so-called African people. And so was born Garvey's Pan-African movement. Or was it? Haven't we done this before? All right. Wasn't that like the white thing back in America? I'm not sure if Garvey knew about that. All right, they tried that. Within a few weeks of his return home, Marcus was already in the works for the creation of the United Negro Improvement Association. Marcus set out to form alliances with the social aristocracy, which predominantly consisted of prestigious white men with the occasional brown Jamaican elect mixed in. An imperative order of business propagated by the first years of the UNIA was their pledged allegiance to the British Empire and King George during the theater of World War I. In fact, Garvey even called for black Jamaican men to enlist in the military and fight with the Allied powers on the Western Front. Just 2 decades before, General Blackton, general of the Jamaican military, spoke at the UNIA. The British military used Jamaican forces in West Africa during the colonization of West Africa during the first 2 Ashanti Wars. In Garvey's mind, Jamaicans have already proven their loyalty to the empire in the greatest way possible by sacrificing their lives on the battlefield. And although this very same regiment was responsible for murdering Africans, perpetuating British rule in Africa, and Garvey himself was a self-proclaimed Pan-Africanist, he was manifestly devoted to the British cause. And in his enthusiasm in supporting the British cause, he may have very well stuck his foot in his mouth. General Blackton had expressed a level of aversion toward Jamaican recruits, advertising his contempt in a string of insults, describing them as a ragtag group of pitiful men, too intellectually incompetent to be of any good use in modern warfare. In his support of the general, Garvey stated in an address at Collegiate Hall, quote, "To the cultured mind, the bulk of our people are contemptible. To go into the country parts of Jamaica, you will see their villainy and vice of the worst kind, immorality, obeah, and all kinds of dirty things. Kingston and its envious are so infested with the uncouthly vulgar of our people that we of the cultured class feel positively ashamed to move about, while this society has set itself to the task to go among the people and raise them to the standard of civilized people." End quote. Not only were the upper-class Jamaicans perturbed by his indifference to their positions, but middle and lower-class Jamaicans saw Garvey as a bourgeoisie wannabe, fully intent on riding the rhetoric of black degradation into prosperity. His grandiose allegiances toward the British Empire did nothing in the hopes to foster goodwill amidst his fellow compatriots. In their mind, Garvey had sold out to the establishment, and they took special exception with him using the same racist rhetoric often propagated by elite whites in their debasement of the darker races. As they saw it, he was an opportunist and no friend to those who consider themselves native Jamaicans. And even worse, a con artist. Suggestions proliferated. Impropriety of the financial sense, of which the dollars weren't making. If the UNIA was the plug, then Garvey ran off on that bit more than twice, as he was accused of misappropriating funds to finance his hot boy pretentious lifestyle. Or maybe they were just jealous. In just 2 years since returning as an unknown third-class passenger on a boat from London, a broke, audacious Garvey had finessed himself into a potential player without the help of aristocratic bloodlines. And as much as they tried, Garvey's influence could not be denied. As he rose, the Bureau of Investigation took a heightened interest in his rhetoric, labeling him as politically subversive. But after an investigation, Garvey was cleared of any incendiary accusations. It is a matter of fact. Marcus Garvey was confirmed, vetted, and deep-rooted in professional and personal relationships with some of the highest-ranking Prince Hall Freemasons in America. After arriving in Harlem, the UNIA was remodeled following the structure, statutes, and even some of the titles used in Freemasonry. As well, officers within the UNIA were indeed Freemasons. John Bruce and Arturo Schomburg, two of the most well-established men in Harlem, operated within circles that superseded their loyalties to Marcus or the UNIA. No matter how close their friendships became, Schomburg and Bruce were Masons first. Yet, this still doesn't answer the direct question. Was Marcus Garvey a Freemason? Here's what we know. In 1922, the UNIA was described by Hodge Kiernan as a fraternal order from its very inception. Harry Albro Williamson, a top Freemason historian from the Grand Lodge of New York, wrote several publications related to Freemasonry, including The Origin of Freemasonry Among Negroes in America, Negroes and Freemasonry, The Negro in Masonic Literature, The Prince Hall Primer, A Chronological History of Prince Hall Freemasonry, The Order of the Eastern Star, and the UNIA publication, The Negro World, promoting the Masonic Brotherhood in June 1922. One of his lovers, not yet mentioned, said Garvey became a Mason through the influence of John E. Bruce, but due to his schedule, wasn't able to attend lodge meetings. She also shared that UNIA members and officers were saturated well within the ranks of Black Greek organizations. Other commentaries from observers made note of the regalia worn by UNIA officers. They wore a military-shaped helmet with a large flowing white feather, closely resembling the uniform hat worn by Masons on special parade occasions. End quote. So if Marcus Garvey wasn't a Mason, it should be a surprise. He congregated with Masons, was mentored by Masons, hired Masons to promote Masonry, created an organization based off the principles of Freemasonry, and dressed like a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Perhaps Marcus wasn't a Mason, and he just took his fanhood to the next level. Nonetheless, the connection cannot be denied in the least. When John E. Bruce, quite possibly the father of the Harlem Renaissance, died, his Masonic funeral was held at UNIA headquarters, and he was eulogized by Garvey. Here is a picture of Garvey standing with Arturo Schomburg, surrounded by Freemasons, at the burial place of John E. Bruce. Take of it what you must, but these Prince Hall Freemasons weren't the only Masons Garvey was in confederacy with.